Like every toxic relationship, it seems as though the on-again, off-again one between Donald Trump and tariffs is off again, sort of. This week, Donald Trump released a new tariff policy, signing an executive order that is set to give some relief for automakers in regards to tariffs. According to the executive order, not only are car makers that pay a 25% tariff on auto imports not subject to other tariffs, for example, on steel and aluminum, or on certain parts of imports from Canada and Mexico. However, the rules do not appear to protect automakers from tariffs on steel and aluminum that their suppliers pass on to them. Car makers will also be able to qualify for tariff relief for a proportion of the cost of their imported components, though those benefits will be phased out over the next 2 years. At his rally this past week in Michigan, which was set up to celebrate the first 100 days in office, Trump had this to say. He said that he was showing flexibility to the automakers, but that he wanted them to make their components in the United States, saying, I quote, "We give them a little time before we slaughter them if they don't do this," which is a really crass way to word that. Under the order, additional 25% tariffs on auto parts that were set to start by May 3rd will also still take effect, but vehicles that go through final assembly in the United States will be able to qualify for partial reimbursement on those tariffs for 2 years. And the potential reimbursement would be up to 3.75% of the value of the car. And again, the car has to have final assembly here in the United States in order to qualify. Which means that on a car that costs, say, $45,000, the reimbursement for the automaker would be $1,687. After that, the reimbursement cap is lowered to 2.5% until 2027, which on a $45,000 car would be a reimbursement of about $1,125. The administration said that it calculated those rates by applying a 25% tax to 15% of the value of U.S. assembled vehicles in the first year, and a 25% tax to 10% of the value in the second year. Now, overall, automakers, especially U.S. automakers, had good things to say about this change, singing Donald Trump's praises and thanking him for his flexibility. And in a CNBC interview, former Ford CEO Mark Fields said that Tesla was the real winner here.
Particularly if some of these changes that were reported by the Wall Street Journal last night on auto parts come through, I think the biggest winner is Tesla because, they have all of their production here in the U.S. They're getting a lot of parts from overseas, but if these changes take into effect, they'll be a winner. I think Ford also, they are also producing 80% or assembling 80% of their vehicles here in the U.S. I think GM and Stellantis are going to be more challenged. Stellantis imports probably over 50% of their vehicles into the U.S. GM about the same number.
I wonder if that was by design.
As you can see, I'm not just MAGA, I'm dark MAGA.
Now, according to reports, these changes will be retroactively applied. So even though this executive order was signed in about a month after tariffs went into effect for automakers, they would still impact the cars that were imported between the beginning of April and the end of April. But to be honest, as a consumer, that doesn't really mean a whole lot for us. And if you did buy a car between the beginning of April and today, it's not like you missed out on any money, as most automakers have pledged to eat the cost of tariffs short term. So the higher cost of vehicles due to tariffs hasn't really had an impact on the new car market quite yet. But for automakers that have imported new vehicles in the last month, this change will give them some relief. And according to the executive order, the purpose of this is to prevent stacking, which would be the instance where maybe a car is tariffed at 25%, but the steel is also tariffed at 25%, and chips are tariffed at over 100%. And then before you know it, a 25% tariff on a vehicle becomes a 30 or 40% tariff. Now, this is good news, and it's absolutely needed reprieve for the tariff situation, which is good all the way around. However, I do think that this also sheds an important light on just some of the volatility surrounding this entire situation as well. Last week, I made a video talking about how right now is not the time to buy a new car because we just don't really know what's going to happen with tariffs, both long-term and short-term, and tariffs could theoretically go away. So let's say, for example, you buy a new car in 2025 and you pay 15% more for that car due to tariffs, and then 2 months later, tariffs are either modified or they go away. Well, then you're going to be stuck holding the bag in that difference in cost, the tariff cost and the new cost without tariffs applied. I think that this is a very real concern in the current state of the new car market, and I think that it's fueled by things like the fact that tariffs were originally supposed to take place in February of this year, then March, and then some tariffs were pushed back to April, and then they were modified a few weeks later. The policy feels a bit erratic, and it makes planning for things like vehicle purchases extremely difficult, and it also makes planning on the part of the automaker extremely difficult as well. For example, General Motors announced their earnings this week, And while they did beat analysts' expectations, they also saw profit fall by 6.6%. And the company has stated that they are reassessing their 2025 outlook due to these tariffs, an issue that could have severe impacts on GM specifically because of the fact that trucks and SUVs for General Motors are not produced here in the United States, and yet they are huge portions of GM sales and General Motors sales growth. And so if General Motors is taxed on these large ticket, high profit margin trucks and SUVs that really carry the brand, well, that's going to be a very, very bad look for the company. And while currently General Motors produces these trucks and SUVs in a variety of plants, including ones in Michigan, Indiana, Mexico, and Canada, Mary Barra, GM CEO, has said that they are already beginning to shift production of these same vehicles to their Indiana plant in order to offset that $4 to $5 billion tariff cost expected from this year alone. Unlike Ford, for example, who manufactures their F-Series here in the US. So this tariff modification does not have as big of a positive impact on General Motors as it does for Ford. Stellantis is another automaker that also reported earnings, and they saw some pretty bad data as well, seeing a $40.7 billion drop in revenue and a 9% drop in shipments, describing these tariffs as a gut punch. And similar to General Motors, Stellantis is making moves to shift some of their Mexico truck production to the United States in order to lessen tariff costs, which again will be particularly helpful with this final assembly component of this new order. The truth is, this tariff situation is a complete and utter mess, and it makes planning for a vehicle purchase extremely difficult, if not impossible, if you are someone who's wanting to retain as much value on the vehicle as possible. Over the last couple of weeks, I made a lot of videos about tariffs, and one comment that I've been seeing a lot is the discussion around the fact that if anybody is buying a new car in this current car market, then they are wealthy enough to not really have to care about tariffs. And thus, it doesn't really matter what car you buy or at what price point, because they're not going to care about 10, 20, 25% that they have to eat due to this tariff policy. And what I have found is that I don't necessarily agree with this, and I think that this isn't the case. And the reason here is that while sure, lower income people absolutely should not be buying new cars, especially in this economic climate, the reality of the situation is that they do. And there are a lot of people that go to a dealership, they buy a new car, and they don't really understand what they're getting into and the context around their purchase. And the conversation of tariffs is a crucial piece of the puzzle that needs to be taken into account whenever you're buying a new vehicle in 2025. Which is why I think making these videos and talking about this is so incredibly important. Because the truth is, right now, you should not be buying a new car. And until we see some more stability within this tariff situation, I would hold off as long as possible. Now, the next big date to keep in mind whenever it comes to tariffs is going to be May 3rd, and that is whenever auto part tariffs are supposed to be implemented. So I will be keeping you guys updated as we see whether or not that gets rolled out, and if it is rolled out, what exactly it looks like. Like always, you guys, I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, comments, if you have anything to add, I would love to hear it, so make sure to leave a comment down below. And while you guys are at it, make sure to hit the like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit that notification bell, and I will see you guys in the next video.